I was originally going to make this video to ask the fandom to become a little less divisive. The fandom seemed to put the episodes into camps of good and bad, episodes that you love and episodes that you hate. The truth is, the show is made up of these pieces. From the show's perspective, they are all the same quality. The opinion of what is good and bad has been put onto the show by the audience. Every episode has been loved by somebody and has been hated by somebody, and everyone has the right to have their opinion on the show without being told they're not a fan for sharing a certain opinion. This video was simply going to be me telling the fandom to stop attacking each other. The love fighting the hate for hating it, and the hate fighting the love for loving it. But then I realised that me ranting on for 10 minutes isn't going to change anything. If we are to become a welcoming fandom again, we have to fix what is breaking it. But then I watched a video by a YouTuber called Mr Tardis, without planning on including it at all, in which he was debunking the myths that some factions of the fandom are perpetrating, and how these myths affect the other fans, and perpetrate these lies. This idea seemed much more effective than my original idea, so I asked his permission if I could do the same thing, which he supported. I'm not going to explain the entire Mr Tardis video, because I would much rather you watch his version, but this is essentially what you need to know. The way these myths work is that person 3 is somebody who dislikes the show, somebody who wants to prove that they are right and everyone else is wrong. They might even have never watched the show, they simply want to argue. They need evidence to do this, so they use person 2 as evidence. Person 2 perhaps hasn't watched the show for years, maybe not at all. They're simply doing it to get viewing figures on their videos. They might even be somebody who will openly say they don't like the show and doesn't watch it. They simply want to get viewing figures. Their evidence for their view is person 1. Person 1 is somebody who absolutely hates the show. They probably actually have watched it quite a lot, but they're trying to destroy it from their own agenda. Potentially they feel that they are right, and they want to see the viewing figures go down in order to prove their point is right. Potentially they don't even want the show to end, because it gives them a reason to make videos. They are spreading either their opinions as undeniable facts, or worse, they are spreading complete lies. Things that are entirely factually inaccurate, and provably so. The problem is that person 3, not having watched the show, takes person 1's view as truth. The only way to stop the cycle is to debunk the lies that person 1 has spread. That's what I'm doing now. Before we start, I want to be absolutely clear. I am not recommending these videos. If you want to, off your own back, watch this material, that's absolutely fine, but I do not recommend you do that. I am watching these videos and debunking them so you don't have to watch them. First one is a video by the Dave Cullen Show. This is a video about the toxic feminist movement, as he describes it, in the Capaldi era, and how this will affect the Jodie Whittaker era. Bearing in mind the Jodie Whittaker era has not yet aired. At this point, we've only seen one trailer.
It's been laced with feminist garbage and progressive gender ideology. This was significantly ramped up during the Peter Capaldi era.
The universe is full of testosterone. Trust me, it's unbearable.
Firstly, this is not a new comment. It was done by Rose in Dalek.
Blimey, you can smell the testosterone.
It was done in Robot back in the 1970s. There's even a scene in The Doctor's Daughter where Jenny escapes a prison by snogging a man. Can you imagine in Series 11 if Jodie Whittaker's doctor got out of prison by snogging a man? By basically saying, men are slaves to their urges. Throughout this video you can see a huge deal of Dave Cullen misinterpreting lines intentionally to change their meaning. For example, this one in Twice Upon a Time. In Twice Upon a Time we are reunited with the first Doctor, now played by David Bradley. The audience took this incarnation to be overtly sexist, racist and homophobic, which writer Stephen Moffat said he believed was realistic for the character.
I didn't go into it thinking that. I went and watched the old ones and going, oh, Doctor, no, maybe not. Oh, don't send her for tea.
Whether or not you believe this to be the case is up to personal opinion, but Stephen Moffat said that he was not doing it for agenda, he was simply doing it to prove the first Doctor was these things. However, there is a certain part of Dave Cullen's analysis that I want to draw you to. Dave Cullen purposely missays this line.
Please, stop saying things like that.
Shh! Don't let a 21st century woman hear you say something like that!
To which he says,
they're actually implying that women are too brittle to hear this original Doctor speak in this way about women cleaning the TARDIS.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
For a start, feminist behaviour only works if men are on board too. It is not anti-woman to defend a woman against a man's sexist behaviour. 2, this is not what he says. He does not say, don't let a woman hear you say that. He says, stop saying things like that. In fact, he's even saying it about himself. That changes the context of the sentence.
Back to normal, am I? I.e., meaning that being male isn't normal, apparently.
In this line, the general is not saying that the female gender is normal and the male gender is abnormal. They are saying that for her, she has been female more than she has been male.
Back to normal, am I? The only time I've been a man, that last body.
The previous companion, Bill Potts, had to continuously tell the audience how she's a lesbian over and over.
How very dare you.
In truth, in 12 episodes of Series 10 and the Christmas special Twice Upon a Time, she says it 6 times. That is less than half of her episodes. And if we're counting Amy and Rory, Clara and Danny, and Rose and Mickey as not going on about their heterosexuality because they're in a relationship, then that means that her 2 dates with Penny don't count, which brings the total down to 4 episodes in 13. Besides the fact, this also comes to another point, which is we're fine to have gay people in the show as long as we don't have to confront the fact that they're there. His next point is where we find out what point he's at in the show, where the colloquially known glass ceiling trailer comes from, the release date trailer.
There is literally a glass ceiling above her head, and then it smashes, and the glass shards fall to the ground, and she says, oops, and then it says, it's about time.
How very dare you.
2 points about this, one of which he raises, is the slogan, it's about time at the end, saying that it's about time for a woman. In actual fact, this is not what this slogan means. This slogan was first used for the 1996 movie, where they were saying, it's about time the show came back. So you can't say this is an entirely feminist statement, because it's already been a part of the show with a different message. But even if we do take this as a feminist statement of it's about time for a woman, which in a way it is, it's just been transformed from a previous meaning, why is that such a big deal? Basically what Dave Cullen is saying is, yes, it is shocking that after 12 male doctors we've got a female doctor, and yes, it is a prominently male world, and a female being cast is a big deal, but I just don't want to have to listen to the fact that it is a big deal. I want it to be completely ignored, which takes us back to the Bill point about her mentioning she's gay. Now at this point, this video tries to contextualise his complaint by saying that the BBC is forcing wokeness on us, and one of the examples that he uses is the use of boys and girls being removed from a school for a non-binary world.
And pushes gender confusion on school kids. This BBC Two show seems all about the social engineering. No more boys and girls. Can our kids go gender free? If that kind of brainwashing doesn't send a chill down your spine, I don't know what will.
Now first let me be clear. Non-binary and transgender does not begin when you're an adult. There are actually charities out there and organisations for children who know they are transgender at an early age. Some people are actually transitioning from the point of being children. Essentially what Dave is saying here is it's absolutely fine to force transgender people and non-binary people to conform to a boys and girls system, but we don't want people who are cisgender, binary people to put up with having it forced on them. In an attempt to say that the whole of the BBC is anti-white male, he draws our attention to some diversity programmes where the BBC is trying to hire more diverse people such as black people and females.
At the BBC, they have hiring policies that actually discriminate against white people and especially white men.
This is not the first time, particularly in Doctor Who, that this has happened. In the 1970s, when they cast Tom Baker, the writing team made a deliberate choice to hire more women as strong characters.
You know, it's awfully good of you to allow this visit, Director.
I hadn't expected male chauvinist attitudes from you, Miss Smith.
I'm sorry?
I'm the director.
In the 1980s, writer Eric Soward used to specify that 50% of his extras should be female, and in fact he used to write in fake female pen names to make it look like women were being hired into roles. This has even run into the reboot, when Russell T Davies used to specify the race of characters in the script because he said white would be the default otherwise. He then moves into a point about capitalism.
The show also has to take a dig at capitalism.
Now, besides the point that this is a perfectly legitimate point to make, it is not the first time we've heard it. It was a major point in The End of the World, in Voyage of the Damned, in Mind Warp, in The Sunmakers. This is not a new thread for a woke 21st century Doctor Who.
The educational aspect of Doctor Who in the 1960s that they refer to in this article didn't last long. Of course, I would expect nothing less from a broadcaster that is now pushing anti-capitalist messaging into its content.
Political episodes off the top of my head would include The Green Death, Robot, Genesis of the Daleks, which literally had the would you kill Hitler metaphor acted out in real life, Remembrance of the Daleks, The Happiness Patrol, and even in modern Doctor Who, The Long Game, which is about the press and Rupert Murdoch, Planet of the Ood. It runs through the show like a word through a stick of rock. He then goes on to say that we've had enough episodes about racial inequality in the show, and he wants to see an episode about people in other countries attacking white people.
While you're down there in South Africa, maybe you could do an episode dedicated to current racism and discrimination against white people. But of course, that doesn't count as racism because it's directed at white people, right?
And then he rounds up the video with something that I was going to say myself, but he took the words out of my mouth, which were,
get woke, go broke.
Now allow me to give you a little history lesson on what this term actually means. The word woke was in popular use in the 1930s, and what it meant was being awake to inequalities and injustice in the black community. This has since been hijacked by people in the 21st century to mean somebody who has been forcibly cast into a role because they are female or black or gay, rather than because of the quality of their work. That is a hijacking of a racial word that has been used to bring about racial equality, being hijacked by the far right to mean anything that a black person or a woman or a gay person is in will automatically be of low quality because they are not as good as their counterparts. And if you don't believe me, here he is saying in his own words,
changing the Doctor to a woman is not being done to serve as some kind of tip of the hat to established canon or to develop the character further. It's being done for political reasons. Anyway, quality of writing is irrelevant now, it seems. Whether the stories are entertaining and innovative doesn't matter. What matters is that the show has the correct political messaging inserted into it. That way, the woke mainstream media will give it nothing but glowing reviews, while the audience ratings will of course be in the toilet.
What he has literally just said, not putting words in his mouth, that is what you just heard him say, is that before the show has even aired, the show is going to get low viewing figures because they have not been sexist enough to cast another white man in the role, and because they've treated women as equally as men, the show will go badly.
The audience will be to blame. Yeah, they won't look at themselves. They won't question their creative decisions and the ideology they pushed. They'll blame the fans who couldn't take any more of their feminist propaganda.
That is literally what he just said. Now, on the topic of viewing figures, since Dave brought it up, people have been saying since Jodie began that her viewing figures have gone down worse than ever. But in order to digest the viewing figures in 2020, you have to look at the wider context. Now imagine, theoretically, we live in a world where we've gone from 3 channels to 5 channels, to hundreds and thousands of channels, to Sky, to Netflix, to Amazon Prime, to Disney Plus, where there is an abundance of television and not enough time to watch it all. And let's imagine that the television has discovered this and have given us recordings and given us catch-up so that you can watch episodes at a later date. That is the case. And if you look at this graph, you can see from Series 1 to Series 12 there is a declining line of viewing figures where people are saying they're losing interest. But if you look at the 28-day viewing figures where people have watched it after the live point, you can see a corresponding graph of the viewing figures rising as they have gone down on the overnight figures. People are watching later. And if you look at this graph, there is actually not that much difference at all from 2005 through to 2020. The viewing figures have not gone down. Categorical fact. So the next video I'll do is this one. In this video, he's basically trying to say that he dislikes Jodie Whittaker. You're fine to watch her and enjoy her as long as you accept that she's terrible.
Then I want to be 100% clear. 100% clear. If you're somebody who likes this era of Doctor Who, mwah, wonderful. Honestly, I'm jealous. I am really genuinely jealous. I absolutely despise it. That's why a lot of her fans are the worst people in the universe.
His reasoning for why she's terrible is that she's a conformist and this is against the character.
Intrinsic to the character is them being a revolutionary genius, somebody who has thrown away their privileged background, their privileged society, on a point of principle, and rebels against authority. So this doctor, the opposite. She's a crushing, horrible conformist, like an absolute conformist. She's one of the blue check marks on Twitter who only the people who thinks the prescribed things.
Now this part really confused me, because in this video he says that he wants the Doctor to be a revolutionary, somebody who fights back against their authority, and yet he says that the 13th Doctor does not do this. This point about being a nonconformist seems to be the key to what he's talking about here. The idea that being a good person and standing up for the underdog is now conformist seems to be that he wants the Doctor to be a nonconformist and therefore not stand up to these morals, which in turn would be out of character for the Doctor.
He sees how important it is for Ryan to have a father and have a relationship with his father, and so he puts his personal feelings to the side, and he ends up being enriched for it. Something the Doctor should really be teaching us.
Now, this is a trope running through Doctor Who all the time. Dalek has the Doctor taking revenge on the Dalek when Rose is the one who's telling him to stop. The Fires of Pompeii has Donna tell the Doctor to save people. Into the Dalek has Clara tell the Doctor that the Dalek can be good and not to jump to conclusions. It's a theme that runs through the show. So again, the Doctor being the one who has to be told by Graham is actually what makes it a good thing for Doctor Who. Now, I was a little bit confused by this video, because so far he seems to be saying that he doesn't like Doctor Who in Jodie Whittaker's era because he doesn't believe it's part of the show.
They're not Doctor Who.
And yet, at this point, he mentions, the women's casting, and he actually says he supports the women's casting and says that Sidney Newman and Verity Lambert's names were supporting it, but he doesn't know who they are.
Sidney Newman in the 80s, right? They got, I think John Nathan Turner got him to write, somebody, maybe Barry Letts, somebody, Sid Sutton, somebody at BBC, got him to write a document of what he would do with Doctor Who, which was kind of flagging in the 80s. And one of the ideas is make the Doctor female. Yeah, it's been going around for a while. Verity Lambert, I'm not disputing you. I'm just saying I've never heard of her.
These two are actually the founding parents of the show. Now, I'm not saying that people who don't know much about the show aren't fans. You are absolutely fine to be a fan of the show if you watch one episode, in my opinion. But it seems a little hypocritical to say that Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker don't know the show very well, and therefore the show is terrible, when he himself is openly saying he doesn't know the creators of the show. Now, watching this video, you may believe that this guy enjoys the show, he's a big fan of the show, and he simply dislikes this era. And in fact, in part of it, he does go through an article and compliments certain episodes. He compliments Kablam, Witchfinders, The Ghost Monument, and you might think he just dislikes certain parts of the show. But then he makes a slip-up about the Doctor's gender.
Yeah, they praise it because Jodie Whittaker has a vagina, right? Basically, they should just be like, oh, Jodie Whittaker's vagina was fantastic!
Now, it seems to me that if I were to say somebody dislikes the show because the Doctor is a woman, they would probably say that is an anti-male statement and a little bit sweeping that I would bring her gender into it. So why is it okay for him to say that fans of Jodie Whittaker only like her because she is a woman? He then mentions safe spaces. In this point he's referencing an article where Jodie fans are congregating, and he's basically sitting and laughing and insulting their ideas.
I understand, people are dicks out there, people are, but you don't need a safe space. You need to be able to stand on your own two bloody feet, right? Which is probably why all these people are massive conformists.
And in part I can understand this argument that maybe it is not a good idea to live in a positive-only world because the world isn't like that. But this show is a very diverse show, and it has a diverse fandom. There are people who are black, who are gay, who are female, who are going to deal with prejudices in every moment of their life. There are people who have autism, or other disabilities, or maybe even have an illness like cancer. And Doctor Who is their safe space. That's where they go to be in a prejudice-free area. And to say that they shouldn't have a safe space, and that they should just deal with it when they're presumably, many of them, are dealing with prejudices in their everyday life, seems a little bit harsh. And that's not just a pro-Jodie thing. There are safe spaces online where Jodie Whittaker conversations and New Who conversations aren't allowed. There are safe spaces for men, there are safe spaces for classic series. It's not just a feminist thing, it is also very much an anti-feminist thing. I've noticed throughout this video and throughout the thumbnails for his other videos that this person seems to be drawing attention to the Doctor's northern accent, and I wonder if that is influencing his opinion on the Doctor's personality. I don't want to lead you in any certain direction as to what this man's opinion is on the Doctor, but just listen to these clips and make up your own mind.
I don't like you because you're a naughty boy. And she's always like, I don't know what to do. What's this? Icky thumb. I don't know what's going on.
Now my third person one is a video by Nerdrotic, where he goes on a call with several other YouTubers where they discuss Series 12, The Timeless Children, and Revolution of the Daleks. And this one even includes some of People 3, people who have only watched this episode and will openly say this. And Nerdrotic and his friends are basically telling them what they should think of the show as a more knowledgeable fan.
I have no idea what was going on in the show because I don't watch Doctor Who, but I knew I didn't like her.
It starts off with them commenting about the Timeless Children, saying that they've basically undone the history of the show because they hate white men and the patriarchy, and saying that they've tried to retcon the show with the Timeless Children.
Imagine if Luke Skywalker was originally, he wasn't Darth Vader's kid, he was just dropped off at some portal somewhere.
This idea that they are pushing on this new fan, that the Timeless Children plot is a completely new idea, is entirely false. It was first conceived in the 1980s when they were going to reveal that Sylvester McCoy's Seventh Doctor was one of the founders of Gallifrey. It was even novelised in the story Lungbarrow by Mark Platt, where it is revealed that the Doctor was the fourth founding father of Gallifrey, known as the Other. But even discarding the 80s, this has always been a fact of the show. In the 1970s, Philip Hinchcliffe tried to say that there were pre-Hartnell Doctors in the brain of Morbius, even showing them on screen. Even down to the very first regeneration, when it was first decided the Doctor could be played by different people, it was suggested that there were other Doctors. In The Power of the Daleks' early draft, Patrick Troughton said that he discarded a ring he was wearing on one occasion, and also produced a bracelet which he said he was wearing the last time he was renewed. So even at the very earliest juncture of it being suggested that more than one actor could play the Doctor, it was also suggested that there were people before the first Doctor. And if you are in any way confused about why they might have this view that it was retconned and forced in, they do go to the effort of saying not just once but twice why they hold this view.
Also, they could make the Doctor a little black girl.
At which point one of them goes on to say what he believes is Chris Chibnall's reason for this.
For agenda, that's it. As a matter of fact, they're embarrassed about anything before.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Even if we discard the verbal references to things such as Autons, the Celestial Toymaker, and the Silurians, there are also physical references, such as the Master holding the tissue compression eliminator for the first time since the classic series. The Timeless Children itself, which is the episode they're accusing of changing history, references the deadly assassin multiple times, and presumably in preparation for writing this finale, Chris Chibnall invited Philip Hinchcliffe to the set of Resolution, Philip Hinchcliffe being the writer that canonised the pre-Hartnell Morbius Doctors in the brain of Morbius, which was referenced in this finale. And again, if you're in any confusion as to why they would have this view when the show clearly doesn't want to forget its origins, they will spell this out for you.
It was just far too white male and toxic.
Now again, to illustrate the point that the classics was too white male in apparently Chris Chibnall's view, they go on to say that
every person who's in charge is a woman. Every man is a bumbling idiot.
They don't give any episodes as an example outside of the one this guy has just seen. In Terror of the Zygons, there was a female Prime Minister. In Kill the Moon, there was a female President.
President of America.
Oh, take something off his plate. He makes far too many decisions anyway. She.
Which, if you look through the subtext, is actually a black schoolgirl called Courtney Woods.
First woman on the moon saved the Earth from itself, and rather bizarrely, she becomes the President of the United States.
And of course, in the Russell T Davies era, where there is a massive amount of feminist behaviour going on, there was a Prime Minister called Harriet Jones. This is not a new thing about having women in power, and the idea that all men are idiots is also not true. Daniel Barton, the Master, Nikola Tesla, Prem, Zelin, there are so many males in this show that are intelligent. They basically seem to be saying that in this one episode there is a woman leader and an idiot who is a man. They go on to the scene in which the Doctor is struggling with her identity, and Ryan tells her that it's okay to be who you are, which they describe as...
Did you pick up where they tried to talk to the fans through Ryan?
Oh, well, when they told the fans to get over it.
Yeah.
And saying that anyone has a difficulty with the Chibnall era should just get over it and stop watching. This is again untrue. In the past, we've had many companions struggle to deal with it. In fact, this scene was almost a carbon copy of the scene with Vastra and Clara in Deep Breath.
The young man disappeared, the veil lifted. He trusted you. Are you judging him?
This is even a kinder way of putting it than that. They don't say screw you to the fans. They actually say it's okay to struggle with the change. They then point out what they think the Chibnall motivation is for this.
And they picked the black dude to do it of all people, to like rub it in.
They are saying a black guy should not have an influential scene. The only reason he has got this scene is he is black. I don't need to tell you this. It's white supremacy.
Will Yaz and the Doctor have a romance? Matt Gill on Connection.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, if they don't, there's going to be like the 5 people that actually like this show are going to be pissed off.
They basically say that Series 13's only plot is going to be that Dan is going to be the guy who watches the Doctor and Yaz's relationship, and if not, the gay community will accuse them of queerbaiting.
Yeah, they'll be accused of queerbaiting.
Now, the term queerbaiting means when you try to give gay people a character arc so that they won't complain without actually following it through. Now, I'm not in a position to say whether this would be queerbaiting. That would be for a gay person to decide. But it's the idea that they would complain about queerbaiting like kids would be an unreasonable complaint. They then come to the conclusion of the episode where Ryan gets on his bike.
Then him back to being I can't ride a bicycle.
Yeah, so no character growth at all.
Now this is a bit of an insult to disability. You can already see that he's able to throw a basketball reasonably well, that he's able to run. You don't need to have him beat the dyspraxia to say he's had a character growth. In fact, the message of this story is that it is okay to have your dyspraxia. At this point, they naturally say that Ryan's dyspraxia hasn't shown up any.
And then they never dealt with any of that in the next episode. He was running around shooting people like, oh, I'm great at shooting because I play video games. Wait a minute, you can't ride a bicycle.
The Grand Theft Auto scene with the sniper bots is nothing to do with his dyspraxia. That is about his other character points of him being impulsive. The fact that when he touched Tim Shaw calling signal, that he is impulsive and that actually started off the era. He disbelieves Hannah's story for no reason and it takes you away. And actually this is a family trait because it is this impulsiveness that caused Grace's death when she tried to attack the gathering coil. This has nothing to do with his dyspraxia. And if you want examples of his dyspraxia, you can actually see them in this episode where Ryan struggles to climb up the ladders, when he trips over when he's running away from the spaceship. And they also claim, of course, that it is never brought up throughout the show.
Then they just forgot that it was part, and then they never dealt with any of that.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Here is a montage of moments where his dyspraxia is brought up.
I should let you know I have a coordination problem. Not super serious, but you know, makes life really interesting.
So, in conclusion, my message to the fandom is simply make up your own mind. Don't decide what your opinion is going to be based on somebody else's. Watch the show and make your own conclusions. And if you don't know what a scene is about, if you don't know the history of a certain show, do your own research. Don't ask somebody else to give you their view on the past, because their view will be biased to their own opinions, and that will affect your view. Think to yourself, do you like this episode? And if you want to evidence something reliable for your reason to dislike it, pick a reliable source. Use opinions, but use them as opinions. Don't use them as a fact to force down people's throat for not agreeing with you. And all in all, be welcoming. If you're talking to a member of the fandom and having a discussion, an open debate, imagine them as a child. I don't mean that as in patronise them and say that they're too young to understand, but treat them as a new fan. Somebody who has just discovered the show. Imagine that they are a child, and imagine what their view of the fandom would be reading your comments. Put yourself into their shoes, tell them what your sources are, and let them come to their own conclusions, have a healthy debate with them. Don't insult them for having a different view to you. Because this show is about kindness, it is about welcoming, it is about equality and decency and humanity coming together and not being divided. But if we continue to spark argument every time there is a debate, every time somebody enjoys something, they are shot down, every time they dislike something, they're having insults hurled at them, then this fandom is going to start to look very different.
If you carry on the way you are, what might that word come to mean?
So, in conclusion, as the Doctor says,
Never be cruel, never be cowardly. Hate is always foolish, and love is always wise. Always try to be nice, and never fail to be kind.
And also don't forget to check out Mr Tardis' video. He said it better than I did.